This story is generated and narrated by AI. If you notice any voice glitches, feel free to comment. Your feedback helps us improve future videos. Do you believe in the truth behind haunted houses? Or do you think it's all in the mind? Let us know what you would have done if this had happened to you. I didn't know my uncle well. In fact, I didn't even remember meeting him when the lawyer called to tell me I'd inherited his property in northern France. I thought it was a scam, but a few emails, signatures, and a translated death certificate later, I found myself on a train through the countryside, staring out the window at miles of bare fields and crooked trees. His name was Etienne Graves. The surname matched mine, but that was about it. My father never spoke of him. Just a vague mention once. He stayed behind. Never really came back after the war. That was the only thing I'd heard about Etienne in 38 years. When the train pulled into the tiny station, there was no one to meet me. No taxis, no buses. Just a long, single-lane road leading into a patch of pine forest. I walked. The house was 5 kilometers from the village, or what was left of it. A church without a steeple, a post office now selling souvenirs, and a bar that only opened on Saturdays. By the time I reached the property, the sky had turned the color of old ash. The gate was open or broken. It hung sideways on a rusted hinge, the kind of thing that groans when it moves, even in memory. The house was larger than I expected, tall, too tall, with narrow windows like watchful eyes. The stonework was beautiful, but weathered. Ivy had climbed halfway to the chimney, and every corner seemed to lean in, as if the house itself was listening. The front door wasn't locked. No key had been given, no warning sent, just a folder of papers and a map with the estate circled in red. Inside, the air smelled of pine dust, wax, and something else, like old meat, buried, then forgotten. I set my bag down and stood in the entrance hall. The silence pressed against me, deep and wide. You don't really hear silence until you're surrounded by it. Not a clock ticked, not a pipe hissed. The place had been empty for decades, and it let me know that. I spent the first evening walking through each room with my phone light. There was no electricity, no running water. I should have left, but something about the place pulled at me. Not curiosity exactly, something quieter, something closer to guilt. The second floor had a study, dust-covered books, faded portraits on the walls. One was of a man I assumed was my uncle. A younger version, tall, gaunt, expression unreadable. In a drawer, I found an envelope. No name, just a single, yellowed photograph inside. 4 men sat around a table, hands joined in a circle. A candle burned at the center. One of the men, the one facing the camera, had his eyes shut tight, mouth slightly open. My uncle sat to his left, and beside him, a blur, not a smudge or damage, but a deliberate blur, as if the image rejected whatever had been there. That night, I slept in the study, on a dusty armchair by the window. The bedroom upstairs gave me a feeling I couldn't explain, not fear, just pressure, like something waiting for me to lie down. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I woke up. The house was still, silent, unchanged, except for one thing. The photograph was gone from the table where I'd left it. The next morning, I walked back into the village. There was no cell signal at the estate, and I needed groceries anyway. In the bar, I met an older woman named Caroline Delaroche. She introduced herself as the unofficial town historian. Because I'm the only one left who remembers anything, she joked. When I told her where I was staying, Her smile faded. "You're in Etienne's house," she said, then paused. "Your uncle. He used to come into town, but not often, and never after." 1986. I asked her what happened in 1986. She looked away. Sometimes people leave for good reasons. I asked if she knew anything about the group in the photo. She didn't answer right away, just stared at me. Then, softly, she said, "They called themselves La Voix du Soul." The voice of the threshold, a spiritualist circle. I guessed. She shook her head. Something older. They weren't trying to speak to the dead. They were trying to listen for something beneath the living. I left with a warning echoing in my ears. "Don't go into the attic," she said. "If the lock's still on, keep it that way." Of course, when I returned that evening, I looked for the attic door. I found it at the end of a narrow hallway, hidden behind a curtain of webbing, a heavy wooden door sealed with an iron latch, and something else, a symbol scratched into the surface, a spiral inside a triangle surrounded by 6 dots. I didn't touch it. Not yet. The following day, I hired a man from town, Eric, to help me clean the downstairs rooms. He was young, polite, and didn't ask questions, but when I mentioned the attic, his smile vanished. "I don't go up there," he said. I asked why. He just said, "Things up there aren't quiet, even when no one's talking." That night, I heard footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate. The attic door was still locked, but something had begun to remember me. The footsteps came again the next night. This time, I counted them. 7. Slow steps, then silence, then something softer, like fabric dragging across wood, or something heavy shifting on the floorboards above. I told myself it was the house settling. Old wood creaks. Wind makes things move, but the wind doesn't whisper your name. Yes, I heard it, just once, faint, like it came from beneath my pillow. "Alex." I got up, lit one of the old oil lamps I found in the cellar, and walked the hallways like a man trying to reason with the dark. The attic door was still locked, but the air outside it had changed. It felt warmer, like someone had just walked past, or was standing on the other side, waiting. I returned to the study and searched again through the drawers. Behind a pile of old receipts and train stubs, I found another envelope. Inside, 3 items. 1. A handwritten note in tight cursive. They said it wouldn't follow me back. They lied. The spiral isn't a ward, it's a mouth. 2. A small audio cassette, labeled only with a date. July 13, 1986, and 3. A pressed flower, blackened, crumbling at the edges. It left ash-like dust on my fingers. I didn't know flowers could rot like that. The next day, I walked into the village again. Caroline wasn't at the bar. Instead, I found Eric sitting outside the church, smoking. He didn't speak until I mentioned the cassette. Then he stood up, took a long drag from his cigarette, and said, "Come with me." He led me into the chapel. It smelled of stone and candle wax, but the altar had been stripped, and where the crucifix should have been, there was only a bare nail in the wall. He reached into a box and pulled out a small cassette player. "People used to record things in here," he said. "Prayers, confessions." He inserted the tape. There was a hiss, then static, then a man's voice, hollow, dry. "Second session, 13 July. It is present." The spiral moved during the night. Etienne refuses to speak to it, but I heard it humming behind the walls. A pause. I saw the man again. The one without skin, he watches through the glass, but there is no glass. Eric stopped the tape. I've heard enough of these. It doesn't stop, just gets worse. I asked if there were more tapes. He nodded slowly. 2 more, but one was stolen years ago, and the other was buried with the others. Others. He lit another cigarette and looked out the broken window. They were 6, your uncle's group. The voice of the threshold, but only one died in town, the others vanished, or so they say. I asked him what they believed, what they were trying to do. Eric shook his head. They thought the world was layered, and if you listen at the right frequency, the skin between ours and another can peel back, like old wallpaper. He dropped the cigarette and crushed it under his boot. Thing is, once you peel something, it usually doesn't stick back right. That night, I returned to the house and locked every door, but the silence wasn't still anymore. It pressed. It listened. I moved the lamp close to the attic door and stared at the symbol again. The spiral inside the triangle, the 6 dots. It looked older now, like the scratches had deepened. I placed my palm over the mark. The wood felt warm. I began dreaming things that didn't feel like dreams. A man standing over me, whispering through his teeth, a woman with her back to me, repeating a number over and over, a child with no eyes, pointing to a wall that pulsed like a living thing each time I woke up. The spiral burned behind my eyelids. On the 4th morning, I found something at the bottom of the stairs, a rock, round, perfectly smooth and wet. I hadn't brought it in. I hadn't seen it before, but I remembered something from the tape. It left the stone again. We should not have listened. I went back to the study, opened every drawer, searched every shelf, and behind a stack of hymnals, I found a journal, Etienne's handwriting, same as the note. The first entry read, April 9th. Something passed through during the seance. It didn't come from where we expected, and it didn't leave when asked. Each page after that grew more fragmented, like the thoughts weren't staying inside the margins. It doesn't speak, but it waits. The spiral isn't just a shape, it's a mouth, and it's learning to smile. I saw Marcel's shadow move after he had walked away. One final note, taped to the back cover. If I don't burn the attic, someone else must, even if they're family. That evening, I stood at the bottom of the attic stairs, oil lamp in one hand, the key in the other. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. The attic door opened slower than I expected. The hinges didn't creak, they sighed, like something had been resting against it from the other side. I held the lamp forward and stepped inside. The air was heavy, not dusty, thick, damp, like the breath of something large and patient. The walls were lined with mirrors, old, warped, not matching. Some were cracked, some clean, and some covered with black veils. At the center of the room stood a wooden chair, facing nothing or everything. I stepped toward it. The floor didn't groan. It pulsed, faintly, like a heartbeat hidden beneath wooden rot. On the wall behind the chair, carved deep into the beams, was the spiral, bigger now and open. There were more pages scattered around the attic floor, torn from the same journal. The mouth wants a witness. We thought it needed blood, but it feeds on eyes, not the flesh. The seeing, it sees through what we remember. It climbs our thoughts like vines on a wall. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe minutes, maybe longer, but when I turned to leave, every mirror in the room had changed. They didn't show me. They showed something behind me, something tall and narrow, no face, just the shape of a man, flinched of detail, but I could feel it, watching me, wanting me to look back. I dropped the lamp. Flames licked across the floor, but they didn't spread like fire, more like ink, staining the room with moving shadows. I ran. The next morning, I found no trace of the fire. The attic was sealed again. No mirrors, no scorch marks, just a locked door and silence. I returned to the village. This time, I brought the journal and placed it on the counter in front of Caroline. She didn't speak. She didn't look surprised. She just whispered, "You opened it, didn't you?" I asked her how much she knew. She looked around, lowered her voice. "Your uncle came to me the night before he left. He said they'd made something that didn't close properly." I asked what it was. She looked up, eyes wide, like she wanted to scream but couldn't. "A window to where we don't belong, and now it's looking back." I asked if it could be closed. She shook her head. "You don't close it. You endure it. You live your life pretending it's not behind you." I left the bar, wandered the edge of the village. Old signs warned about sinkholes, but they weren't holes. They were spirals, eroded paths winding down into the hills, like something big had turned in the earth. The ground itself was marked, and no one seemed to notice. That night, I tried to leave. I packed everything, journal, tapes, keys, and drove until I hit the forest edge. But the road didn't end, it repeated, no matter how far I drove. I passed the same leaning fence post, the same broken birch, over and over. Eventually, I stopped the car, got out, and screamed into the trees. Nothing echoed back. When I returned home, the front door was open. Inside, every wall bore the spiral, drawn in ash, etched in glass, burned into fabric, and there, in the center of the living room, was the chair from the attic. It had moved. There was a new note on the seat. In my handwriting said. I stared at it for hours. The urge to obey was enormous, not like compulsion, like hunger, like inevitability. Eventually, I did. The moment I sat down, the walls began to vibrate, not shake. Vibrate, like they were humming some low, forgotten chord, and the mirrors began to return, not in the room, in my mind. Memories reshaped themselves as reflections, my childhood hallway. A streetlight on a rainy night. My mother's face, but blurred, like underwater, all of it watched me. And then, I saw it, not in the room, not in the mirrors, but inside the dark spiral behind my eyes. It had always been there. A being made of recognition, not flesh, not shadow, but notice. It didn't move, it unfolded, layer by layer, thought by thought. Every memory I had, it climbed, until it could wear me like a story. I don't remember getting up from the chair, only that when I blinked, the day had passed, and I was back in the study, but I was no longer alone. I stopped sleeping, not out of fear, but because I no longer knew if I was dreaming. The boundary had eroded. I would close my eyes, and instead of blackness, I'd see the attic. I'd see the chair, waiting, always turned slightly toward me, never fully. I tried recording myself, audio, video, but the playback was always wrong. My voice came out distorted, not glitched, just wrong, as if someone had memorized how I spoke and recited it back slightly off. Then came the eyes, in reflections, in windows, in puddles, not pairs, but singular, just one eye at a time, wide, lidless, unblinking, always centered in whatever frame they appeared. I tried smashing every mirror, but they grew back. Yes, grew. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but then I left a blank wall overnight, and the next morning, there was a small mirror embedded in the plaster. I painted over it. It bled through. Eventually, I covered every surface in cloth and wood, but the images began appearing on paper, in the margins of books, in old receipts. Always that spiral, always that eye. I drove to the nearest city, found a priest, asked for help. He listened, didn't laugh, but when I showed him the journal, he went pale. He handed it back and said, "That's not for closing. That's for opening." He gave me a name, a woman in the mountains, a recluse, a folklorist, someone who'd written about cognitive trespass. Her name was Odelia, no last name. I found her. She lived in a hut made of stone and stained glass, windows covered from the inside. She opened the door before I knocked. "You brought it here," she said, not a question. I asked her what it was. She didn't say a word. She just reached into a drawer and pulled out a matchbox. Inside was a folded note, written in the same ink as the journal. There's no what, only the watching. Then she told me a story about a cult in the 1800s, a group that believed attention itself was divine. They built a sanctuary in the woods, filled it with mirrors, not to see themselves, but to become more visible. They thought if something watched them hard enough, they'd be translated. Most vanished. The ones who remained were blind, but not in the physical sense. They just stopped recognizing things, faces, rooms, themselves. I asked Odelia how to stop it. She shook her head. "You were the last piece, the final pane of glass." I didn't understand until I got home. There was no house, not a single board left, only a spiral in the dirt, as wide as the foundation, as deep as the earth would allow. And at the center, the chair. I should have run, but there was no road anymore. Only trees, only mirrors, only eyes. I sat, and this time, I didn't return. Or maybe I did, but not as myself. I watch now, through lights, through screens, through you. That chill on your neck as you scroll too long. That flicker in the glass when you're sure you're alone. That's not a trick. It's not me. It's what followed me out. And it sees you now. Don't look behind you, not because something is there, but because it will start being there once you look. Because that's how it works. You don't witness it. It witnesses you. If this haunted house story got under your skin, leave a comment with the isolated witness so we know you made it to the end. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you want more AI voice horror stories from the shadows.